Morning, ladies and gents, Germans and Amoeba. Welcome to the Introduction to Programming lecture for December the 19th of 2012 on section 8.5, a method summary. We're going to go ahead and just summarize all the stuff we looked at in this chapter with regards to object methods, class methods, static, non-static, public, private, and all that other fun stuff I know you enjoy. If you thought you were going to get out of a lecture just because I'm not there, well, gotcha. Without further ado, let's talk a little bit about class or static methods. So recall, class methods are sometimes called static methods because they have the keyword static in their heading. Class method is called with the class identifier. Think about the math class and things like the .sqrt function, and not with an object of that class, in contrast to, say, the decimal format class, where we created an object using the decimal format constructor, and then we call one of the methods, in this case format, to go ahead and create the format based on what we put in our object. This is practical when there's no need to make multiple objects of a class. Again, think back to the math class. The value pi doesn't change, neither does the method square root, no matter what you do. Versus some of the classes we've looked at, such as bank, where every time you create a new object, it represents a new bank account. Okay? So if we take a look at this public class demo with class Piggy, you'll notice that these are class methods. Notice that they're here. You can see that they're static. They're called by calling the class Piggy. And you have a couple of methods there: init data, show data, add data with the 1200. That's our actual parameter 1200 going to the formal parameter S. And then show data, just an output of what your savings is. Okay, as you might guess, Piggy stands for bank account. These are static methods, thus the museum static icon. Okay, just an example of static methods and how they can be used. Now, object or non-static methods are sometimes called, well, non-static methods. They don't have the static keyword in their heading. And recall, this is where a lot of our things have been. Go back to phone company. Those are non-static methods so that every time we needed a new utility company, we could create an object and have it stand for them. Object methods are meant for those situations where multiple objects of a class must be constructed. Going back to the bank class, you might have multiple accounts. Our example in class used Tom and Sue, as you can see on the prior slides. An object must be constructed first with the new operator, and then the object methods are called by using the object identifier. So an example of that, if we look at this public class demo, well, here we've got Piggy Tom equals new Piggy, and Tom.init data, Tom.show data, Tom.add data, and Tom.show data again. If we look at class Piggy, we've got private double savings, public void init data, void add data, and void show data. These aren't static methods, which means I could create multiple instances of the Piggy class. This one again is called Tom. Now what this does lack is multiple constructors, so it would be a little different to give them different data, but they'd at least have different names. Now public methods, if you recall, talk about where you can access them from. Public methods are accessible from any class in the same folder. An example of this was our bank class. We were able to create and modify bank objects inside of a driving class or running class, even though they weren't necessarily in the same file. And most methods are public. Very few are private. Now, private or helper methods are exactly the opposite. They can only be called within their class. Okay? So occasionally a method is created in the class that can never be called outside the class. The one we looked at was called picket, and it was pulled within a picket fence. So the picket method created the actual picket. Picket fence implemented it to create the actual fence. There was no reason to call the picket outside of that class. It was a private method, and these are called helper methods. They're simply subroutines that your class uses to assist in whatever function it needs to perform. Void methods do not return a value. So remember, we have two types, void and also return values. They use the reserved word void to indicate when the value will be returned. So for instance, in this function, show data, you'll see the public void right here. You'll see the void keyword. And this simply outputs a couple of data, pieces of data here. Now return methods are methods that return a value. Two features are necessary for a return method. First, you'll see that the method heading indicates a data type, whether it be int, double, boolean, float, etc., which is the type that the method returns. So down by our return statement, you'll see at the end of the method body, this variable, in this case savings, needs to match the data type given, in this case double. Regardless of what data type you give, if you tell it you're going to return something, you have to, otherwise you get a compiler error, let alone a logic error. Now, default constructor methods we talked about yesterday. A constructor is a special method that is automatically called during instantiation of a new object. The one we looked at together was for the bank class. It automatically created a bank account that had 0 balances. If no visible constructor is provided, Java will use its own constructor to call the default constructor, and it will do very similarly initiate our data to basic values. Additionally, we also call a no parameter constructor a default constructor, much like the one for the card deck shown at the right and the bank account we looked at yesterday. Now, overloaded constructors are this idea that I can have a default constructor in existence that takes no parameters, and I have other constructors that do take parameters. Our bank account had two, for instance. One that automatically set our balances to 0, and one that automatically set our balances to whatever we entered. In this case, card deck is going to take two integers D and P, probably for decks and players, and calculate the values necessary. Okay? And I quote, an overloaded constructor is the second, third, or more constructor that allows a new object to be instantiated according to some specifications that are passed by parameters. This is what I described. Now, access or get methods are methods that only access object data without altering the data are called accessing or get methods. Most accessing methods are return methods, which return object private data information. So if I have some private variable, like number of decks, I need a get method or an accessor method to get to it. Otherwise, I can't touch it. If I try to access directly using the object identifier, I'll get a syntax error. Altering or modifier or mutator set methods. Well, these are methods that only access the private data of an object. They also alter the value of the data. So going back to our bank account, we had savings deposit, we also had checkings deposit, we also had savings withdrawal and checking withdrawal. These allow you to change the private variables without allowing access from anywhere. Again, thinking back to the bank example, you don't get to go into the vault and put your money in and change the value on your account. You have to use a method for that. As you can tell, this is the end of the slideshow. That's a basic summary of what we've looked at. For the rest of the period, I'm going to ask you to continue working on your labs. I'll be back tomorrow, obviously waiting to see what you work. I'm expecting a good report, guys. Have a lovely afternoon. As always, may the Schwartz be with you.